How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me, as usual, is Leonard, and this is segment surgery, where we take a segment, not necessarily a match, although a match is involved here, but we take a segment, a promo, something that's not just a match, and we go over it and discuss it and debate it if necessary. So this week, Leonard is choosing our segment to analyze. So, Leonard, what do we have?
So when thinking of a segment for our new segment surgery segment, say that 5 times fast, I wanted to go with something that was fairly famous, but that I hadn't seen, and I thought maybe Chad hadn't seen. And one of the first things I thought of was Shane Douglas winning and then throwing down the NWA World Heavyweight title belt, which happened in the summer of 1994. And this was something that, of course, I knew about. I heard about it. I'd seen clips and still images. But as we both mentioned in the past, we didn't watch a lot of original ECW, especially at this time, because where we were at, it wasn't available. It wasn't on the air. Or where it was available, it was usually on very late or at odd times. And being 1994, the internet didn't exist. You couldn't pop on YouTube the next day and watch this clip that someone had posted or what have you. So to give some setup here before we get into the actual, bit, in September 1993, the National Wrestling Alliance and World Championship Wrestling parted ways. And not to get deep into it, but there was some animosity between them. There was a court battle over the belt because the NWA owned the name, but WCW owned the physical title belt. Eventually, things got cleared up, and the NWA regrouped and was going to hold a tournament to declare a new champion. Now, the territory system was pretty much dead, but they still had some affiliated promotions, the biggest of which was what was known at the time as Eastern Championship Wrestling. So, the promoter-owner, Todd Gordon, and the booker, Paul Heyman, who I believe was still going as Paul E. Dangerously at the time, said, we'll take the tournament. They had some television and such, and it was decided that their champion, Shane Douglas, was going to win the belt. Now, supposedly from some elements I've read, that Dennis Corluzzo of the NWA board didn't like Gordon, didn't like Heyman, didn't like Douglas as the pick, and that led to some animosity, and supposedly led to Gordon and Heyman and Douglas coming up with what happened, which is what we'll get into. So first of all, I found on YouTube a 22-minute, I believe it's about 22 minutes long, video that includes the match, the promo, and some aftermath of it. So it's the whole deal, what's going on. And the match itself is about 13 minutes. So this is from August 27th, 1994 at the ECW Arena in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's the finals of a tournament. Shane Douglas versus Too Cold Scorpio. And the match, especially as it starts out, is pretty standard. Basic grappling bout between the two at the start. It picks up a little bit in the second half. Scorpio goes up top at one point. They go outside at one point. Douglas winds up winning with a belly-to-belly suplex. I wonder if they went specifically kind of old school and traditional because it was for the NWA World Heavyweight title, and if that was out of reverence or out of a mocking thing. I mean, technically, I think it's a good match. I would give it about 3 stars, but there's not a lot of chemistry or story being told.
I would say it's a little bit of both of what you said there.
Yeah. So go ahead. Your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to add about the match. I think it's a little bit mocking, but also a little bit like, this is how we're going to play things right now. Because if you listen to the commentary, and I don't know if Joey Styles knew it was going to happen. Maybe he did. But he's building up the legacy of the NWA title. And, they're resurrecting it and all the names that have held the belt. And, he's building it up pretty consistently throughout this match. And knowing what happens, it makes that commentary all the more interesting. And then you watch the match, and like you said, the first half of it is very standard wrestling, and then it gets into more of Too Cold Scorpio's high-flying stuff. They do some stuff on the outside. The match is fine. I would agree with you, maybe 3.25 stars overall. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they were maybe steered in a certain direction of how to approach this match.
Yeah, that may be a good word, steered. So anyway, after the match, Too Cold Scorpio gets the microphone, puts Douglas over for winning, says he's going to come after him for the belt. Very standard there, but mutual respect between the two. You can see that. So then Douglas puts Scorpio over, and then he talks about how this day has been a long time coming and how he knows his father is looking down from above. And he goes on to name a bunch of former world champions: Luthez, Jack Briscoe, Dory Funk, Terry Funk, Buddy Rogers, Harley Race, Barry Windham, Ric Flair, which a name he chokes on because he and Flair famously did not get along.
Right.
And like someone throws out Kerry Von Erich, and then he says Kerry Von Erich and Rick Steamboat and Dusty Rhodes, and kind of rambles for a bit on all these names. And then he says they can all kiss his ass, and he throws the belt down in the ring. And that's your money moment right there when he does that. And Douglas says he's not a man that accepts a torch handed down to him from an organization that died 7 years ago. That Douglas is a man who ignites the new flame of the sport of professional wrestling. He then gets the ECW title belt, which he had at the time, and declares himself the new ECW World Heavyweight Champion. So calling the promotional title a world title. They've set out to change the world of professional wrestling, and so let the new era begin, the era of the franchise and the era of ECW. Big ECW chant from the faithful here. Scorpio then comes back in and seems to be saying something, but we can't hear him. I think they cut the microphone off and everyone's loud. But he does shake Douglas's hand, so it seems to be like he's cool with what Douglas did here. So your thoughts on the segment, on the promo after the match?
So I've seen clips of this before, basically just the the short clip of him throwing the title down, but I had certainly never seen the match nor the promo in full. So it was cool to watch this. And the fact of the matter is, this was a very big, bold statement from Heyman and Gordon, and this was the beginning of Extreme Championship Wrestling, and they were declaring that they were going to go in their own direction. And they also said what should have been said years before this, which is that the NWA was dead. And just to further, confirm that for anybody who doesn't know or listen to podcasts or watch documentaries, not that I'm stating something that has been stated many times before, but like going back to World Class Championship Wrestling, when they broke from the NWA and decided, this was in the late 80s, when they decided we don't need the NWA anymore, we're just going to do what we want because we have a lot of viewers, in the Texas area. And, then flash forward to, mid 90s, and finally you have somebody doing it. And I think it's really very riveting to see. And I think Shane Douglas is an interesting person to have been a part of this moment because he's such a divisive figure in pro wrestling. Like, even especially by the standards of his peers, some people talk highly of him, some people don't like him at all. But like him or not, he's a part of this moment, which, I think, was a good move. It was showing that Heyman and Gordon were going to be their own thing, and that the standards of the past were passé, and nobody needed the NWA anymore. And it took the NWA a long time to try and build themselves back up even a little bit and maybe capture some of that reputation again. And now obviously Billy Corgan owns it and is trying to make something of it. But this was really great. I thought it was fun to watch. I'm not, very versed on all things ECW, but I thought this was really cool to see the birth of what that organization will become. And, the Public Enemy there at the end, spray painting the sign, which was pretty neat too. So.
Yeah. So after that, then this is obviously from ECW TV. We get Dennis Corluzzo saying what happened was a disgrace and that Douglas is still the NWA champion according to him, but he's going to go to the board and not only have them strip him of the belt, but of the ECW belt as well, both titles. And then you get Todd Gordon saying that Corluzzo can't tell him what to do, and he's dissolving Eastern Championship Wrestling, leaving the NWA, and that Extreme Championship Wrestling is now what they're calling it, and the place that recognizes Douglas as the champion, and anybody can come and face Douglas. And then we get the Public Enemy bit that you noted where they spray paint Eastern out on a banner and they write Extreme in.
Right.
So, yeah, literally and figuratively, this is where ECW, I think, was born, Extreme Championship Wrestling, because not just in name, but in attitude and basic makeup. And they were kind of doing some things with hardcore wrestling, different things before this. But this is where they really kind of took a step forward, I feel. And it should be mentioned that the NWA regrouped again. And then I believe it was in October or November, they wound up having another tournament through Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which wouldn't be long in the world. And Chris Candido won the belt. And this was really at a low point for the Dan Severn would get it. He would have it on WWE television for a while. They were affiliated with TNA for a few years, but then they dissolved. And then you had this idea where Rob Conway had the belt and a bunch of other people before it kind of started to come back a little bit with Billy Corgan. Now, at the time of this recording, Tyrus, a.k.a. Funkasaurus, Brodus Clay, is the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. And a lot of people are poo-pooing on that. And the NWA had a falling out with Nick Aldis, who I felt had really done a lot to bring back some respectability and some credibility to that title. So, but yeah, I think you're right. The NWA probably had died prior to that, but this was the nail in the coffin. I think this was where the NWA really went from being still having sort of a tradition and a connotation to it to being passe and just not a factor in the world of professional wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of these smaller promotions today, you know, when they affiliated with the NWA, it's almost like they were saying, you know, okay, we're going to use the name for as long as it suits us. But then they realize quickly, well, we really need them, you know. So
yeah,
you know, and then they just kind of part ways. Especially look at TNA. You know, Jeff Jarrett talks a lot about that on his podcast. But yeah, I mean, like this was a very good segment, and you know, very briefly on the Tyra situation. I haven't watched his title victory or anything, and I know Nick Aldis apparently is alluding to, you know, maybe wanting to stay a free agent for a while. It'll be interesting to see where he goes, if he goes to either of the major companies.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him at the Royal Rumble.
See, I worry. Actually, you know what? I think the same worry could be applied to both major companies right now. Mm-hmm. And that worry is that if he goes to one of those places, he might just be another face. I would say that I feel that's more of a danger for him in WWE than I do in AEW.
Well, AEW, I think, seems to have a glut of a lot of people, and I think a lot of people get lost in the shuffle there. Where with WWE now, with Triple H, I think that there's more of an opportunity for the cream to rise. And I look at what AJ Styles did. You know, a lot of people were surprised when AJ Styles made his Rumble debut. And, you know, I think if all this goes, I think it would be similar to an AJ Styles situation. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, you know, wherever he lands, I'll be happy to see it. You know, I would like to see with as many high flying luchador guys in AEW, like there's a lot of variety there. Personally, being a fan of AEW and both companies, but I would like to see Nick Aldis in his old school style there, because I think that company needs some old school style. I mean, their champion has more of an old school style right now, MJF. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, Rumble debuts are a big thing, so he's primed to make a debut there if that's what he wants to do. But yeah, let us know what you think of this segment, and if you agree or disagree with our thoughts, let us know. We'd be happy to hear from you. We have other videos, stupid questions, random match reviews, and our full-length episodes. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And for Leonard, my name is Chad, and we will see you next time.